YouTube and the internet. It's Nate Quinn with Clover Defense, and I'm here with another episode. Going to preface this episode with the same preface that I am not a medical professional, medical provider, medical expert, anything medically related. I'm just a guy with a story and an experience, and that's what I'm hoping to share with you all here. So today's episode is about intrusive thoughts. These intrusive thoughts are probably like the single largest issue that I encountered personally going through my own journey, particularly because I didn't know what they were, didn't know how to define them. And so that's what I hope to illuminate here. This is going to be a little bit longer of an episode because there's a lot that went into this. This was probably my biggest hurdle. But an intrusive thought is an unwanted thought, image, impulse, or urge that can occur spontaneously or that can be cued by external or internal stimuli. The thoughts themselves are amoral and they can be about anything at all. The negative variations of intrusive thoughts are usually about things you might find disturbing or disgusting. Common themes include sexuality and violence, or just generally inappropriate themes. The thoughts themselves are typically ego-dystonic, meaning they are antithetical to who we are as people, right? Or we being like the person having the thought, antithetical to you as the person having the thought. Or, goes completely against the grain of how you see yourself or what you believe in. And that's typically why we find them so disturbing. So now that we've defined what an intrusive thought is, right, another way that I came to look at them that was extremely helpful was mind spam, right? So I began to look at it as just, that old email where like the prince wants to give you $3 million or something like that, but he just needs your social security number and your mailing address and all these other, personally identifiable information tidbits. Nobody ever took that seriously. Nobody was like, oh man, yeah, my long lost prince cousin has $3 million for me. Let me just send them all this stuff. Right? I'd like to think most people didn't believe that person. But point is, you didn't take it seriously, right? You're like spam, delete, right? Looking at intrusive thoughts the same way was very helpful because it helped me not take them as seriously. Some of the most outrageous, rambunctious, disgusting, disturbing things would just pop up, and I was like, what the hell, man? But as I came to look at it as mind spam, my brain was just spamming me with shit because that's whatever brains do for some reason. That helped me kind of separate myself from my thoughts. Another way to look at it that I only discovered more recently, I think this was within the past year, was a misfiring protective mechanism. And by that, what I mean is your brain is trying to protect you from certain actions, and it's flashing these kind of like these what ifs at you, right? Like, hey, what if this happened? What if that happened? And it's trying to show you these things in an effort to get you to, I guess, back away from them. Not that it was ever, a concern. Let's say, it's showing you that you want to jump off the cliff. Okay, were you ever seriously considering jumping off the cliff? No. But your brain was just like, watch out, there's a cliff, don't jump off it. And it shows you an image of you jumping off a cliff. Well, thanks a lot. I wasn't thinking about it until now. But it's a protective mechanism that's misfiring. Excuse me. So, oddly enough, intrusive thoughts are actually pretty common. That's a normal part of the human phenomenon. Most people experience intrusive thoughts and they go largely unnoticed. For most of my life, I never noticed these intrusive thoughts. It wasn't until I noticed them and I started to fixate and perseverate on them that it became a problem. This led to anxiety, guilt, shame, eventually depression, disgust, insert negative feeling here. And so one of the key things to remember, and again, the mind spam analogy helped me kind of drive this home, was that we are not our thoughts, okay? And our thoughts are not actions. All right, I began along that line of, our thoughts are not actions. I personally began to experience what was referred to as thought action fusion. And so this concern that, kind of like the video clip I showed earlier from Evil Dead, where whatever I thought was going to happen, because I thought it was going to happen, right? That there was no filter between thought and action. Um, you know, just absurd though it may sound, I feared that I would just lose control of my body, um, and act out my thoughts. And I was worried that I was my thoughts. And then I began to judge myself, and I was like, how could I think that? Like, what was I thinking, right? No pun intended. Um, and the reality is that we cannot always control our thoughts. And I think that's important. Um, so here are some effective methods that I came up with, or that I tried, um, to help me throughout my dealing with intrusive thoughts. So the first thing was, being able to recognize them, right? Not immediately, but being able to identify, like, hey, that was an intrusive thought. Um, that is the first thing you need to do, is be able to identify it and go, hey, yep, that was an intrusive thought. Because again, what that allows you to do is to, okay, hey, I can frame this like mind spam. I don't need to really worry about it. You can remind yourself that, your thoughts are automatic. Again, it's spam. It's not under your control. You don't get to choose what emails, what spam you get and what spam you don't. With that, and this is kind of a nuanced skill set, but being able to accept the thoughts and not try to push them away, right? And I will dive more into why that's important here in a minute. Again, treat them like mind spam. You never actually believed there was a Nigerian prince going to give you $3 million. Or maybe you did. I hope you did. Just treat the intrusive thoughts the same way. Don't take them so seriously. Another thing, I tried writing out the thoughts on paper. For whatever reason, getting them out of my head, or even saying them out loud, if to no one else, to myself, an empty room, that helped get the intrusive thoughts out of my head, right? Getting them somewhere else, anywhere else really, was extremely helpful. Whether that's paper, whether that's talking to a video, or you're just saying it out loud to know, or just whatever the mechanism is or the medium is, just get it out of your head. You don't have to do this, but like one of the things I did that I found very helpful was I would tell my wife, right? I would tell my wife my intrusive thoughts. It helped me, again, get them out of my head, but it also helped me obtain a sense of, how I was doing, and also give her, as one of my confidants, like, she can see where I'm at too, so, and again, like, informing that protective layer that I had created, like, hey babe, I just had like this weird intrusive thought. And she'd be like, oh yeah, that is weird. Huh. Anyway, just move on with life. One of the things that I remember reading that I found very beneficial was that if these thoughts were true, right, you have an intrusive thought, right? If it was true, it wouldn't bother you, right? But the fact that it bothers you, or it irks you, or it makes you squeamish, that's a good sign, right? Again, it goes back to that misfiring protective mechanism. Um, you know, when I said don't push the thoughts away, just accept them, you need to be patient, all right? You need to give yourself time. There's no urgency to make the thoughts go away, all right? Unfortunately, they will stick around as long as they do, right? Sometimes I had intrusive thoughts that would come and go. Others, I came to call them sticky thoughts, right? They would just stick. And it would lead to me becoming anxious, because I was like, man, this intrusive thought has been around for a hot minute. Like, why won't it just go away? And I was getting anxious because it was lingering for such a long time. But when I did that, I made it worse, right? Because now I'm focusing on it, and I want it to go away, which is going to make it not go away. So the analogy I came to was, I remember Barry laughing at me with this one. You're in a pool or tub, and you peed in the pool. You peed in the tub. Okay. Is it disgusting? Yeah. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is it going to kill you? Is it going to hurt you? No. It's just disgusting. You're just sitting in it. You're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't like doing this, but it's not going to kill me. It's not going to hurt me, right? And that kind of again helped me be like, okay, hey, these intrusive thoughts are sticking around. It won't go away. It won't go away. I'm like, all right, hey, I'm just in the pee pool. All right, that's going to sound silly, but hey, man, I'm just sitting in this pool. Somebody pissed in it, and I'm sitting in this pool, and it's got pee in it, and it's uncomfortable, but it's just pee. That's all it is, right? Trying to make light of the situation a little bit helped reduce the severity and the anxiety. But don't, you're in no rush to make those thoughts go away. Because again, the more you do that, the more they're going to stick around. And then you also have to remember that pink elephant analogy that I did a few episodes back, where don't think about this pink elephant. Knowing that the human brain cannot process negative thought cues, don't try to not think about the intrusive thoughts, right? So if I had an intrusive thought about jumping off a cliff, we'll go back to that one because that's already there. I'm not going to don't think about jumping off the cliff. I'm going to instead choose to think about something else. All right. Jumping off the cliff is going to be bouncing around here in the background, white noise. It's like, my grandpa used to have the TV on volume 100 in the living room. No one was listening to it. You could hear it. It was in the back of the background of whatever you were doing about your day in the house. Nobody was listening to it, but you could hear it, right? But nobody was really paying any attention to it. But it was still there. Didn't hurt anything. Treat the intrusive thoughts the same way. Still back there in the background, jump off the cliff, yeah, whatever. So anyway, I'm going to keep going about my day. And it's tricky not to look at it like the same thing. Like it sounds similar, like don't try not to think about this, instead choose to think about this. But it's choosing to passively ignore the intrusive thoughts rather than actively ignoring them. That's about as plain as I can make it, right? Like if you're being active in your attempt to ignore the intrusive thoughts, you're giving it energy, which is going to make it persist. So just passively ignore it by choosing to focus on something else. And it's got to be a choice. That's important because you're rewiring that neural pathway to choose something else. The last thing that it was actually Barry who taught me this at the very beginning of my journey was like letting go of the rope, right? So the analogy was, so I'm standing there, whatever. Intrusive thought comes up. It's got a rope in its hand, and it starts hitting me on my knuckles, right? It's like just trying to get my attention, right? And when I was focusing on the intrusive thoughts, I had grabbed onto the rope, right? And so now the rope is pulling me, it's leading me to places, and I'm holding on to this rope. It's taking me places I don't want to go, seeing things I don't want to see, hearing things I don't want to hear. And I'm trying to pull the rope back. And what Barry taught me was like, let go of the rope. You are not obligated to hold on to this rope. You can let go at any time. And so telling myself that, in addition to, hey, it's a pee pool, mind spam, misfire protection mechanism, telling myself like, hey, let go of the rope. And like sometimes I would do that. I would say it out loud. I'd be like, let go of the rope. And if that's what you have to do, that's fine. But the rope here being the intrusive thoughts. Like you're not obligated to hold on to it or pull it back. Like who cares? Just let the rope go. You don't need to do anything about it. And that was another very helpful thing for me. So, just to recap the big things, don't try to make it go away. You're in no rush. Look at it like mind spam. Let go of the rope. Choose to focus on something else. And the pee pool, right? It's going to be uncomfortable. And that's okay. There's a difference. This was a big one. There's a difference between having a thought and buying into a thought. You can have a thought. You can accept a thought, which is key with intrusive thoughts, like, right, yep, that's a thought, okay. You don't have to agree with it. There is a difference. And that took me a long time to understand the distinction between accepting a thought and agreeing with a thought. The two are not mutually inclusive, right? If you refuse to accept a thought, that thing is going to stick around, whether you want it to or not. But acceptance is not concurrence, right? It's like, oh yeah, there's a thought, mind spam, whatever. You don't have, but like there's a difference between that and like, oh yeah, I agree with that, right? Key part of that is remembering we cannot completely control our thoughts, and that's okay. Like, it's just part of being a human being, okay? So one of my examples was early on, right? And again, this is highlighting how much of a challenge this was for me. I would have intrusive thoughts about suicide, right? My brain would just be like, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to pick up this gun. You're going to shoot yourself. All, again, misfiring protection mechanism, because that's what I was worried about. So my brain was like, don't do this. Don't do this. I didn't know what I was dealing with at the time. So in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I keep thinking about suicide. Like, that must make me suicidal. But I knew internally that this made no sense, right? Objectively, if I, remove emotion from the picture, look at it objectively, I had a loving wife, loving family. I was about to be a father. I had a job that I enjoyed mostly.
They're getting slaughtered. We got to cover their retreat. Michael's coffers based on me.
The people around me were supportive. I had friends and family that loved me. I knew there were people, even around when I was in Niger that were like, had it far worse than me, and they were happy. So I was like, this makes no sense. Like, why would I want to kill myself? This doesn't add up. I wasn't suicidal. I was having intrusive thoughts. Barry would later come to call them like morbid thoughts, intrusive morbid thoughts. And I see this a lot, and I definitely did it. One of the things I developed was this notion that I had to fight these thoughts, right? I had to fight them. You see it all over the t-shirts, fight your demons, win the fight nobody tells you about. And I certainly did that, right? I subscribed to it, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna fight this thing. I'm gonna win it. To the point where it became detrimental, right? I think initially it was good. That was an important and positive step, right? Like, hey, refuting these, challenging them, fighting them. But after a certain point, you experience diminishing returns to where, you are now giving it energy. And I had this massive analogy that I came up with, right? So I'm going to preface this with, I'm a bit of a nerd, right? Movies, sci-fi, all that fun stuff. I'm a bit of like, not a huge nerd, but I'm nerdy. That makes sense. So I imagined this epic battle going on in my mind, right? So I pictured the intrusive thoughts as this massive army of like formless, shadowy creatures that were all at once terrifying and malicious and apparently a threat, right? And so I had to array some force against them. So I summoned to my left and right, fictional entities from various, sci-fi fictional movies. So I had, anybody who's familiar with the Warhammer 40K universe, I had Adeptus Custodes, the Grey Knights, the Adeptus Astartes, some Dreadnoughts. Check it out. I also had Jedi from Star Wars, Republic Commandos. I even brought in John Wick. Couple others.
Send me. They fight for country. They fight for honor. They fight to win.
So now, I had all these, like, dozens, if not hundreds of these, right? Like these super soldiers and these Jedi and John Wick. And so we established a defensive perimeter. And this monstrous army of shadow creatures was charging us, and we crushed them. All right, again, like I'm surrounded by a bunch of badasses. We're fine, but every time we destroyed one, another one would show up. Eventually, could be days, could be hours. Again, the horde would form again after a certain period of time, and it would charge our position. And this happened more times than I could count. And my theory was like, I just have to hold the line, right? We got to hold the line. And sometimes we won, and sometimes we lost terrain, and we had to, we scooted back a little bit. But eventually I was like, man, this is just fucking exhausting, right? So then one day I was like, okay, I'm going to try something new. And, again, I'm imagining, the intrusive thoughts are mounting. So I imagine, the shadowy horde coming, and everybody's digging in, getting ready. And they're, I say, hey, get ready, but, don't shoot. Ready, hold your fire. And they come, they're getting closer. My anxiety's going up, and then nothing, right? They're swirling around us, these monsters, these shadowy figures. But nothing's happening. And they're scary, and they're uncomfortable, but they're not hurting us. They're just there. And I realized that by choosing to engage these thoughts, choosing to fight them, I was giving them corporeal form. That gave them power. But by just accepting them and being amongst them, I removed that fear factor, that anxiety, right? I didn't have to fight them. And that's when I realized that if I didn't resist them, they just remained these intangible things that were like uncomfortable, sure, but harmless. So then I began to apply that to the intrusive thoughts. And so that kind of goes against the grain of the whole, like, you got to fight them. And I'm not saying, like, don't fight, just, I'm not saying quit or give up. What I'm saying is, like, fighting initially can be beneficial, but at a certain point, it is important to realize that you don't actually have to fight. You can just, like, all right, man, you do you. I'm gonna go do me over here. One of the other analogies was, I forget, it was a book that Barry mentioned, but he's like, My Friend Panic. And so this was helpful to me too. I would start having anxiety or intrusive thoughts, right? And in the book, I forget the name of the book, but the guy invites panic in, treats panic like a friend, right? He said, hey, come on in, take a seat, have a drink. What's up? What can I get you? And he interpreted the presence of panic as like something's wrong. All right, let me investigate. Let me see what's wrong. And so I started to do that myself, right? If I had an intrusive thought, like, hey, what's up, intrusive thought? So like my joke would be like, if I was doing chores, I'm sitting there cleaning dishes, and the intrusive thought pops up. I'm like, hey, shut up, grab a brush and help, or go sit down. And that, believe it or not, like that actually helped me work through intrusive thoughts. Or if I was lifting, right? If I'm in the gym and I'm lifting, intrusive thought pops up. I'm like, all right, hey, it's your set. Fucking pick up some weights, right? Sounds silly, but it worked for me. But the biggest thing that, I think the the mind battle analogy helped me realize was it reminded me of the Christian Bale scene, or I'm sorry, the Batman scene with Christian Bale when he's in the Batcave. And so I began to view my intrusive thoughts as those bats, right? I'm Christian Bale, and the intrusive thoughts, the bats, and you're just standing there in their presence, right? Um, Again, might be silly, a little bit nerdy, but it helped me a lot. Another less cinematic way to help view intrusive thoughts that I found helpful was like there's cars on the freeway, right? I'm looking at a freeway, I'm watching cars pass left and right. They're just cars. Just cars like, oh, yep, there goes a car. There goes another one. There goes a red one. There goes a purple one. Whatever, right? They're just thoughts. You're like, yep, there goes a thought. There goes another one. Who cares? Um, so those were some of the techniques that I applied that I found helpful. Maybe there's movies out there that you guys have seen that you're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this one movie. For me, I like cinema, so it was very helpful to use the story and the narrative to help me work through these things. The other thing I did was CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, there was a guy recently that I was working with, and he said, CBT didn't work for him, and that's okay. It worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody, and not all of these techniques and these procedures or processes are going to work for everyone. It's my hope that something works, but don't get wrapped around the axle around any one particular thing. I urge you all to try this stuff, and if it doesn't work, then try something else. Just keep trying, find something that sticks. But CBT, I'll put the definition up here, and you guys can see it. But I came to look at CBT as helping me rewire my neural pathways. For a long time, I would experience an intrusive thought, and that would automatically lead to depression and anxiety, right? I mean, that's what led me to become depressed. Using CBT, I began to try to condition myself to look at the intrusive thoughts and respond to them in a different way. And it's hard because, obviously the path of least resistance in my mind was the one that was most often trod, which was intrusive thought, depression, anxiety, right? So that's where it's like water, right? That's the way the water wants to flow because that's the way it's been flowing. So now I'm trying to recalibrate and dig a new path to like, hey, intrusive thought doesn't necessarily have to go to depression and anxiety. It can go somewhere else, to try to help guide it in that other direction, right? That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of repetition. And sometimes it doesn't always work. Sometimes, despite my best efforts, my brain went out and it went, hey, depression, anxiety. And I was like, well, shit, that didn't work. Okay, I'm in the peep pool. This is uncomfortable. Whatever. It's not permanent. It'll go away. It might stick around longer than you'd like. Often probably will. But it's not forever. And that's okay. That whole experience of like trying to rewrite the neural pathway but not being successful in doing so, like that is normal. That happens. And again, it's important to reiterate that even having intrusive thoughts is a completely normal part of the human experience. All right. And this is important for two reasons. One, it highlights that everyone experiences intrusive thoughts in some way, shape, or form. Right. And two, you've probably had intrusive thoughts before. You just weren't really aware of them until now. So it's normal. It's okay. You don't intrusive thoughts are what they are, and they look different for everybody. But the important thing to remember is in and of themselves, there's nothing wrong with you if you have intrusive thoughts. One of the challenging things that I dealt with towards the end, so as we wrap up here, was I remember thinking, and this not only extends to intrusive thoughts, but I think extends to largely depression and anxiety as a whole. But I remember thinking, you know, I want to get back to where I didn't have these thoughts. Like I want to go back to normal. Um, and I was, I remember Barry saying like, hey, what do you want out of treatment? What do you want to get to? And I remember telling him that I want to get back to normal. I want to get back to before. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was trying to like softly kind of let me down. Like that's not really possible. That's not a thing. And what I didn't realize at the time was I was setting myself up for failure, and it was an impossible task. Intrusive thoughts never really go away. And again, part of that is because they've always been there. Just never noticed them before. The white noise was always going on in the background. The TV was always at max volume. I was just busy doing other shit. And that's okay. And having hard days where the intrusive thoughts win is also okay. I think the more appropriate goal that I developed was getting to a point where intrusive thoughts didn't bother me as much, or I didn't notice them, right? So instead of saying, I don't want to have these thoughts anymore, I want to go back to where I didn't have these thoughts, I was saying, hey, I want to get to a place where these thoughts don't bother me, right? And again, this kind of walks hand in hand with that whole, I am not trying to not think about these thoughts. I am instead choosing to think about something else. And that distinction, right, sounds similar. The end state might be the same in that I'm not bothered, right? But it's how I got there, right? It's not realistic or effective or even healthy to say, I don't want to have these thoughts, right? Because you can't control that. But what you can control is say, hey, I want to choose to focus on something else. And I want to recalibrate my neural pathways to the point where, like, when I have these thoughts, they don't bother me as much or at all. It's kind of like how patients work with tinnitus. I've heard it pronounced tinnitus, whatever, the ringing in your ears. Instead of trying not to focus on that ringing sound in your ears, they focus on something else. And eventually that noise fades because your brain is choosing to think about something else. You're not really worried about that anymore. So I think that is a key distinction, particularly with intrusive thoughts. And it's tricky because it kind of blurs back and forth, right? Like trying to avoid not thinking about something, choosing to think about something else. And it's a very fine line, and it takes a lot of practice. And sometimes I still struggle with it, right? Like sometimes I'll still get into little periods where I'm like, damn, that intrusive thought was a doozy. Like that one really bothers me. Okay, I'm going to do my best to just like be with it, be with the thought, be in the pee pool. Okay, I'm going to focus on something else. This is really uncomfortable. A couple hours go by, maybe a couple days. Like, man, this, I check back, like, yeah, the thought's still there. I'm like, hey, intrusive thought, come on in here, help me, move some furniture around, help me pick up some weights, change, throw out the diapers, whatever have you. And sometimes I'm not as successful at it as I would like to be. And that's okay. So yeah, intrusive thoughts. That was a big thing for me. Comment below on if intrusive thoughts have ever been an issue for you. If you have had other success with other techniques, and what you think about some of the techniques that I discussed. Really appreciate you guys' time. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry it's been a minute. I had to disappear for a professional hiatus, but happy to be back. Happy to be trying to help people out the best way that I can. And until the next time, see you guys then.